I want to start by imagining. So will you do that with me? Imagine for a moment that you've come to downtown Orlando on a beautiful night like tonight with your family. You're going to walk to your best favorite restaurant. Got that picture in your mind? As you get close to the door, you see a guy out of the corner of your eye. He's scruffy, got a beard, looked like he hasn't had a meal in a long time, and he's got a sign in his hand. You got that picture in your mind? So the question is, what do you do? And so to answer that question and begin to have that conversation, I went to Scripture. And in Luke chapter 10, a lawyer was questioning Jesus. Now, that's not the weird part, a lawyer questioning. But he asked the question about this commandment. He said, Jesus, help me understand. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength in your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So the lawyer says, Jesus, who is my neighbor? Jesus then shares the parable that most of us grew up with, and it's one of my personal favorites. So Jesus says, a man's traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. He was beaten and robbed and left to die on the side of the road. A priest and a Levite walked right past this man, right past the stranger. Too busy, too important, too disconnected to care. But the Samaritan came by. He stopped, he dressed the wounds, he put the man on his donkey and took him to the closest inn. And then he said to the innkeeper, I will pay for his time here until he heals, and if it costs more than what I've provided, I will come back and pay some more. This story is so relevant for what work I do today. For too long, and to too many strangers, our society has treated those experiencing homelessness as the priest and the Levite treated the stranger on the road. We see our neighbors on the street or under the bridge, suffering from mental and physical disabilities, robbed of their dignity and needing our help. Yet just like the priest, we avert our eyes and walk right past them. Or we see families, are real hidden homeless, robbed of their livelihoods through layoffs or economic downturns, forced out of stable housing, and like the Levite, we turn the other cheek and continue our routine, not stopping to help in any way. The saddest for me is that we see young people in our region robbed of their innocence through years of abuse, living alone on the street, and like the Levite and the priest, we simply turn away. But the good news in Central Florida is we're rethinking the way we address the homeless in Central Florida. I like to call it the 21st Century Samaritan. We want to help those left dead on our streets or dead to society in a new and different way. So what does this 21st century Samaritan look like? Well, like the Samaritan of old, what's most important is we get them into housing. Because as obvious as it is, when you put someone in a home, they're no longer homeless. And I am so proud to say, with this approach called Housing First in Central Florida, in 18 months, this community has housed 700 of the most severely, chronically homeless individuals in our region. If we had not turned to this approach, the likelihood of their dying on the street was greatly enhanced. What else could we do as the 21st century Samaritan? Well, one thing is that we need to treat the wounds of the populations who are homeless. For the chronically homeless, that means not just putting them in a home, but making sure we're treating their mental and physical disabilities. And you know what's interesting? When we take this approach, it's actually cheaper for our community than when we keep them on the street. For the families, that means not only do we rapidly rehouse them, but we have to provide new job opportunities so they can stay in that home, so that they can afford the rent that we ask them to pay. And for young people, wow, it's helping them rebuild crisis relationships, gaining independence, and connecting them back into our community. Like the Samaritan, we must invest in the long-term wellness of the stranger. And for the 21st century, in our community, that means providing housing for everyone in our community. Housing that we can afford, housing that is stable. The Samaritan was the only thing standing between the traveler and certain death. And so it is today. Somewhere right outside this hall, our neighbor is laying in the street, wounded either mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. So I'll ask the question again. What will you do? Well, first, I think we have to think about God's commandment to love God with all our heart, our strength, our mind, our soul, and love our neighbor as ourselves. We must first then think about our commitment to God's commandment. We must rethink how we treat our neighbors. We must rethink homelessness. Please come join me on this journey and be the 21st century Samaritan that we need. Thank you.